When certain moments unfold in your life, they don't feel random. They arrive like a whisper from something higher, nudging your soul with a quiet familiarity. Alan Watts often reminded us that nothing truly happens by accident. The universe moves with an elegance we rarely understand. So if you found this video now, not earlier, not later, perhaps it's because you've reached a point your spirit has secretly been preparing for. Life has been shaping you through hardship, silence, and unanswered questions, polishing you the way waves polish stone. Only when you're finally softened in the right places does clarity know where to land. There are seasons when we feel lost, misunderstood, or painfully behind. But what's taught that feeling lost is often the very proof that you're being guided. Like a wave that rises not for its own choice, but because the ocean calls it upward, you too are lifted by forces you cannot see. You are not late. You are not failing. You are arriving, gently and precisely, at the version of yourself capable of receiving what was once overwhelming. Until the heart is ready, even miracles sound like noise. Many people try to force growth, rushing toward enlightenment as if it were a race. But the deeper truth is that awakening happens in its own strange timing. The seed doesn't bloom because it wants to. It blooms because the earth decides the moment is right. Maybe the pain you've carried wasn't punishment. It was preparation. Every disappointment cleared space. Every delay redirected your path. Every silence taught endurance. Without these, the blessing meant for you might have been wasted. Watts believed the universe is playful. It hides wisdom in the unpredictable. Look closely at your journey, and you'll notice how every closed door shaped your character, how every storm deepened your compassion. What felt like abandonment was merely rearrangement. Life was quietly aligning the pieces, removing what could not travel with you into your next chapter. Not everything lost was a loss. Sometimes the soul outgrows what the mind still clings to. So maybe this moment isn't coincidence at all. Maybe it's synchronicity, a cosmic handshake between where you've been and where you're going. If this message resonates, it's because a deeper part of you already knew it. The moment God, fate, or the universe decides you're ready, life stops whispering and begins speaking directly to you. And perhaps, just perhaps, this is one of those moments. Alan Watts often compared life to music, not a journey with a finish line, but a melody meant to be felt note by note. The problem is that we live believing real life begins later, when we succeed, when we heal, when we finally become ready. But readiness is not a destination. It is a recognition. You are not waiting for life to begin. Life is waiting for you to notice it. And so, what appears as delay is often divine timing. Moments are withheld not to punish you, but to protect you from receiving blessings with hands still shaped by fear. When the soul ripens, what felt distant suddenly arrives with effortless precision. Think about the times you desperately chased something that wasn't meant for now. Relationships, opportunities, dreams. They slipped away no matter how tightly you held them. Watts would say that forcing life is like trying to keep a wave frozen in the air. Beautiful in concept, but impossible by nature. The harder you cling, the more chaos you create. Instead, life asks you to surrender, to trust that the unfolding knows more than impatience ever could. When you loosen the grip, you widen your capacity to receive. This is why closed doors are sacred. They redirect you toward corridors your mind couldn't imagine. We are conditioned to view no as defeat, but Watts taught that rejection is the universe gently withholding anything that would shrink your becoming. You're not being denied. You are being aligned. What doesn't grow you goes. Every goodbye becomes architecture for the next hello. Every ending reshapes space for beginnings that fit who you are becoming, not who you were afraid to be. And so, readiness is not built in comfort. It's forged in the dark, in lonely nights, unanswered prayers, and moments you thought would break you. But instead of shattering, you bent. Instead of collapsing, you adapted. Those hidden victories sculpted emotional armor, refined intuition, and amplified resilience. Without those silent battles, you wouldn't recognize true opportunity if it stood before you. Pain was never punishment. It was preparation. This is why this message found you now. Because only now do you possess eyes trained by experience, a heart softened by loss, and an inner stillness carved by uncertainty. Before, you would have overlooked what now feels undeniable. You needed each fragment of your story to assemble the version of you capable of stepping into the next chapter without trembling. Readiness is not about strength, it's about awareness. And awareness is finally here. Watts believed that the universe is like a grand dance, everything moving in harmony, each step leading seamlessly to the next. Yet, many spend their lives trying to control the choreography. You plan meticulously, fearing unpredictability, convinced that certainty equals safety. But control, Watts taught, is the greatest illusion. When you grip life too tightly, you stop dancing with it. You begin dragging it, and the soul suffocates under weight that was never yours to carry. Real readiness begins the moment you stop controlling life and start collaborating with it. Think of it this way. You are not separate from the rhythm. The same intelligence that orchestrates tides, seasons, and galaxies also stirs quietly within you. When something doesn't unfold as expected, it's not sabotage, it's synchronization. Life is adjusting the tempo, introducing the right characters, and clearing the stage for your entrance. What feels like delay is often choreography happening behind the scenes, arranging outcomes you're not yet positioned to understand. The ego hates this. It demands answers, timelines, and guarantees. But the deeper self rests in mystery. Watts emphasized that life cannot be grasped intellectually. It must be experienced. Trust is not passive. It is a courageous participation in the unknown. When you stop demanding that life obey you, you begin noticing how gracefully it supports you. Doors open not because you force them, but because you grew into the person who could walk through them without hesitation. This is where true readiness reveals itself, in a shift from anxiety to awareness, from asking, when will it happen, to recognizing, it's happening through me. You start seeing signs you once ignored, opportunities you once feared, and people whose presence carries purpose. Synchronicity doesn't appear randomly. It appears when you've attuned your inner world to the outer one. In this harmony, what once felt invisible steps directly into your path. So understand this. Readiness isn't about accumulation. Not more strength, more knowledge, or more control. It's about subtraction, less fear, less resistance, less attachment to what should be. When enough of the unnecessary dissolves, the necessary arrives effortlessly. And when it does, it doesn't demand that you chase it. It simply recognizes you, because you have finally become the version of yourself it was always meant for. Alan Watts often spoke about the illusion of separation, the belief that we are isolated beings navigating a hostile world alone. But this illusion creates the third barrier to readiness: disconnection from the present moment. When your mind is trapped in memories or anxieties, you miss the subtle invitations life offers right now. Readiness can only exist in the present, because the present is the only place where life actually happens. Every time you drift into what was or what might be, you abandon the sacredness of what is. And the soul can only awaken in the space you're willing to inhabit fully. Consider how often you replay past mistakes, hoping to rewrite them, or stress about futures you can't control. What's reminded us that these mental projections are mirages. You're chasing shadows while missing sunlight. The universe won't hand its greatest gifts to someone distracted, not because you're unworthy, but because you wouldn't recognize them. The heart sees differently when it is grounded in now. It hears whispers the mind overlooks. In presence, life's patterns become visible, and timing becomes intuitive rather than accidental. Presence is also where healing happens. When you truly sit with yourself without distraction or performance, you begin to feel what you've been avoiding. The pain, the longing, the unspoken dreams, they rise not to hurt you, but to guide you. Watts believed feelings are messages, not enemies. Avoiding them delays growth. Embracing them accelerates it. When you honor every emotion, you deepen your capacity to receive blessings without sabotaging them. That capacity is a sign of readiness, not perfection, but honesty. This awareness transforms your perception. Suddenly, coincidences feel purposeful. Synchronicities look like conversation. A chance encounter becomes a catalyst. Nothing is random to the soul that's awake. When you inhabit the present fully, you move in rhythm with life rather than swimming against its current. And in that effortless flow, what you're meant to meet rises to meet you. This is not magic, it's alignment. Readiness, then, is not something you chase. It's something you allow. It's the moment you stop running in circles within your mind and anchor yourself in the truth of now. Because the present moment is the bridge between who you were and who you're becoming. And crossing that bridge consciously is the quiet initiation the universe waits for, patiently, until you're truly here. What's often reminded us that life does not punish, it educates. And the greatest teacher of readiness is contrast, the fourth subtle force shaping your timing. You learn what you want by facing what you don't. You recognize healthy love only after tasting the bitter echo of its absence. You recognize peace after enduring storms. Contrast carves clarity. Without it, blessings would slip unnoticed through your fingers because you'd have nothing to measure them against. Every wound sharpened your discernment. Every disappointment refined your taste. Think about the relationships that fell apart, the jobs that drained you, the friendships that faded. In the moment, they were painful. But now, look deeper. Each taught you boundaries, self-respect, patience, or intuition. What's believed that discomfort is feedback from the universe saying, not here, not this. Without contrast, you'd settle in places too small, clinging to chapters that were meant to end. Contrast pushes you out of rooms your soul has outgrown. It is not cruelty, it is calibration. As contrast molds you, something subtle shifts, your standards rise. Not out of pride, but out of recognition. You stop chasing anything that costs your peace. You stop entertaining what confuses your intuition. You begin choosing alignment over attachment. The soul becomes louder than the ego. And when you choose in harmony with your inner knowing, life responds faster, clearer, with uncanny precision. You don't force doors anymore. You wait for the one that opens effortlessly. In this transformation, you begin noticing moments where you say no with ease, where you walk away without bitterness, where you trust silence instead of demanding answers. That's readiness. It's the shift from begging life to guide you, to trusting that it already is. Watts taught that wisdom is not found in accumulation, but in release. When you let go of what once hurt you, you free space for what's meant to help you. The universe doesn't add to clutter, it replaces it. And so, contrast becomes a compass. It points you away from what diminishes you and toward what elevates you. Every heartbreak became an opening. Every failure, a redirection. Every loss, an unveiling. When you finally understand this, you stop asking, "Why did this happen?" and begin whispering, "Thank you for preparing me." Because only through contrast do you become the version of yourself capable of holding what's coming next, without fear, without doubt, and without apology. Alan Watts believed that identity is fluid, always shifting, always evolving. Yet many people cling to who they once were. This clinging becomes the fifth barrier to readiness, attachment to old versions of yourself. You carry outdated beliefs, habits, and labels like heavy luggage, even though the journey ahead requires lighter steps. When you define yourself by old wounds or past limitations, you limit what the universe can bring you. Readiness is not just about what you're moving toward. It's also about what you're willing to leave behind. Think about how often you say, "That's just how I am," or "I've always been this way." These are not truths. They are cages. What's taught that the self is not a solid object, but a flowing process, like fire burning or water moving. When you rigidly cling to an identity, you interrupt that natural flow. You cannot step into your next chapter while arguing for the constraints of the previous one. To receive different outcomes, you must allow yourself to become someone who would naturally walk toward them. Letting old versions die is uncomfortable because the familiar feels safe, even when it's painful. But evolution demands discomfort. Growth stretches the soul. It asks you to step into uncertainty without guarantees, trusting that the person emerging will be wiser and more aligned. Every time you release who you were, you expand who you are capable of being. This death and rebirth cycle is not dramatic. It happens quietly, in choices and boundaries, in whispers of intuition you finally obey. As you shed old skins, something extraordinary happens. Opportunities begin to match your new energy, not your old patterns. People treat you differently. Rooms you once tolerated begin to feel too small. Conversations shift. And in this subtle rearrangement, you realize readiness is not about becoming more. It's about becoming honest. Honest about what you want, what you fear, and what no longer belongs in your life. The universe honors honesty because it aligns you with your true direction. So understand this. The version of you watching this now is not the one who needed to survive, endure, or settle. You're no longer standing in the ruins of who you were. You are becoming, in motion, fluid, infinite. When you accept that identity is meant to evolve, you give the universe permission to deliver blessings that match who you are now, not who you used to be. That acceptance marks the moment destiny stops waiting and starts unfolding. The sixth subtle force shaping readiness is solitude. What's often said that society fears being alone because we mistake it for loneliness. But solitude is not the absence of others. It's the presence of yourself. In quiet spaces, away from distraction, you encounter your soul without filters. And that encounter can be confronting, which is why many avoid it. Yet readiness requires self-intimacy. You must know your own voice before you can hear guidance from something greater. During solitude, you begin to notice patterns, not just in your life, but in your thoughts, emotions, and desires. You see where you've been lying to yourself for comfort, where you've been shrinking for acceptance, where you've traded authenticity for belonging. These realizations are uncomfortable because they dismantle illusions. But illusions cannot receive blessings. Only truth can. Solitude peels away every layer that separates you from your essence. It's not isolation, it's integration. But here's the paradox. The moment you become comfortable being alone is the moment you stop accepting lonely connections. You no longer chase companionship to escape yourself. You seek alignment instead of attention. This shift rewrites your entire emotional blueprint. People, opportunities, and experiences that once resonated begin to fade. Not as punishment, but because your soul outgrew the frequency that sustained them. You're being tuned to something purer. What's taught that enlightenment is not about adding knowledge, but removing noise. Alone, you begin to hear the faintest whispers, intuition, purpose calling. These whispers are easily drowned out by crowds, opinions, or the relentless pursuit of validation. But in solitude, clarity returns. You begin to understand what you want, what you deserve, and what you will no longer tolerate. This clarity is the language the universe responds to. Without it, readiness cannot truly form. And then something remarkable happens. The loneliness you once feared becomes sacred. You no longer run from emptiness. You honor it as space being prepared. The universe cannot deliver what you lack room for. Solitude is the clearing, the cleansing, the silent ceremony before a blessing arrives. When you stop filling your life with noise, the right signal comes through. That is the moment the universe whispers, "Now you're ready." Alan Watts often emphasized that life is a process of continuous letting go, not as loss, but as movement. The seventh subtle force that determines readiness is surrender. Not surrender in the sense of defeat, but surrender as acceptance. Most people hold a tight vision of how life must unfold, and when reality disagrees, they fight it. But what's taught that you cannot push the river, you can only flow with it. When you surrender, you stop wrestling with life and begin dancing with it. That shift alone can open doors you never knew existed. Surrender requires humility, because the ego wants certainty and control. It wants guarantees before taking a step, but readiness rarely feels perfect. It often arrives disguised as risk, discomfort, or vulnerability. Those sensations are not signs to retreat. They are signs that you're expanding. The universe doesn't ask you to leap once you feel safe. It asks you to leap and then discover wings. This is how faith evolves into experience. Without surrender, destiny remains theory. Let's look honestly at the roads you've walked. Every time you forced something, you suffered. Every time you let go, you grew. Surrender doesn't erase fear. It teaches you to move with it rather than freeze beneath it. What's compared this to breathing? You must release the breath you hold before another can enter. In the same way, you must release what you cling to before what you desire can reach you. Only an open hand can receive. As you surrender, Life stops feeling like an opponent and starts feeling like a partner. You begin to trust subtle signs instead of ignoring them. You listen to intuition instead of silencing it. You feel guided rather than lost. This is what readiness feels like. Not answers, but alignment. Not certainty, but clarity. You begin to suspect that everything you feared losing was actually making space for what you were meant to gain. And with this surrender comes peace. Not the peace of a perfect life, but the peace of a trusting heart. You realize you don't need to know every step, only the next one. The universe has never required more from you. It only asks that you stop resisting what already wants to enter your life. That moment of surrender is the silent signal the universe has been waiting for. There is a final element that reveals true readiness, self-worth. What's often pointed out that many people unconsciously reject blessings because they don't believe they deserve them. You can prepare, you can grow, you can surrender, but if you still see yourself as unworthy, you will sabotage what arrives. The universe cannot give you what you continually hand back. Readiness is not just emotional or spiritual, it is energetic. You must believe you are worthy of what you're asking for. Consider how often you've settled for less. Jobs that drained you, friendships that wounded you, love that dimmed you. You accepted these not because they were the best you could find, but because you thought they were the best you could have. Now, awareness reveals something profound. You deserve reciprocity, respect, peace, and joy. As this belief settles into your bones, your standards rise, and life mirrors that rise. Worthiness is permission. Permission for blessings to stay instead of slip through cracks of self-doubt. When you embody worthiness, your energy changes. You stop chasing validation. You stop bargaining with your value. You no longer fear losing what aligns with you, because what aligns with you will not leave. You move differently, not with arrogance, but with quiet assurance. Watts taught that confidence rooted in ego crumbles, but confidence rooted in self-awareness is unshakable. From this state, opportunities recognize you faster, and you recognize what is meant for you more clearly. It's in this stage that everything you've learned, presence, contrast, surrender, solitude, identity, integrates into something whole. You realize life was never holding you back. It was holding you together. Every delay was timing. Every heartbreak was alignment. Every unanswered prayer was protection. You weren't being tested to prove yourself. You were being prepared to receive yourself. And when all of this clicks, when your heart expands, your mind quiets, your worth settles, and your soul feels seen, that's the moment the universe whispers, gently and undeniably, you're ready. Not because everything is perfect, but because you are. You have finally become the person capable of holding what has always been yours. When you look back across the landscape of your life, you may notice that every moment of solitude, every unanswered prayer, every closed door and painful ending shaped you more precisely than anything you willingly embraced. Alan Watts would remind us that the universe doesn't rush its masterpieces. Timing isn't accidental, it's intelligent. What once felt like delay was preparation. What once felt like loss was redirection. And what once felt like silence was instruction. Now, with clearer eyes and a quieter heart, you can see how the fragments align, and how each one sharpened you for what's arriving. All the lessons you carried, presence, identity, surrender, worthiness, weave together into something whole. They weren't random chapters, they were requirements. Without them, blessings arrive too early and crumble. With them, blessings find a home. That is the quiet equation of readiness. Life was never asking you to be perfect, only to be aware of who you are now, aware of what you deserve, aware of how the universe has supported you even when you thought you were abandoned. Understanding this transforms waiting into trusting, and trusting into receiving. And here's the truth most overlook. Readiness is not signaled by certainty, but by peace. You stop chasing. You stop forcing. You stop grasping. Something inside you settles, as if your soul exhales after holding its breath for years. You feel a strange calm not because nothing can go wrong, but because you finally know who you are when things do. That inner steadiness is the doorway through which every aligned opportunity enters. It's the unmistakable vibration that life recognizes instantly. This person is no longer afraid of their becoming. So, if this message resonated deeply, understand that resonance is recognition. The part of you that understands these words is the same part that's ready to step forward. The moment destiny knocks is never loud. It's quiet, like this, a stirring, a knowing, a gentle pull towards something you can't quite name. Follow it, allow it, trust it, because the same force that led you here is already arranging what comes next. You're not crossing into a new chapter. You are the new chapter, and everything else is simply catching up to meet you. And now, if you feel aligned with this journey, breathe deeply and join this community of souls awakening at the same divine pace. Subscribe, like, and share your reflections in the comments. Not because an algorithm asks, but because connection strengthens awakening. Your voice, your presence, your insight may be the spark someone else needed to hear today. Together, we shape a collective reminder. When the universe decides you're ready, nothing and no one can delay what's meant to find you.